painting? I think so. Let's see. Hopefully music's not too loud there. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're doing well and having a good spring break for many of you. Maybe you're on spring break, or you've got kids that are on spring break. Maybe they're just beginning spring break, or they're just ending spring break. It kind of moves around depending on where you are. Not just in Canada, but around North America anyway, is when we traditionally have spring break for children in K through 12. And I guess if you're in university, I read something about people partying down in Florida despite all of the lockdowns and everything. But anyway, that's Florida. It doesn't surprise me. Okay, so today we are going to make a painting based upon one of my favorite authors, who also happens to be an incredible artist. While I was putting together today's episode, I was doing some research and I was asking some good friends, which painting, if you were to think of one painting that would represent Lord of the Rings or J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings, or The Hobbit, or any of the other books that for this incredible world that he developed, which one would it be? And going back and forth, and probably some of them are watching right now because this is the only way I could get them to pay any attention to what I'm doing, is if I picked The Hobbit or the J.R.R. Tolkien. That would get their eyes and their attention. Anyway, we go back and forth, and then I just thought, well, let's just take a look. And I realized J.R.R. Tolkien was a pretty prolific and very talented artist. Let's just take a quick, spilled some water already. But, there's a number of books all about his art here. We're going to look at some of this, but probably some better images that are rather than from the book here. But what I think is really interesting about Tolkien is that he not only wrote all of these, fantastic books and stories, but here's today's painting. We're going to look at it. It'll be a little more colorful. I think it's almost a little dark up there. So he not only wrote these, but he did some fantastic illustrations to help him. Here's another book here, but we're not going to go through all that. So, in fact, let's just launch right into this. I'll show you some images on the screen. Now, this is the painting that we're going to make, or this is what I'm going to make. Whatever you want to make, you can do whatever you want to do. And here is the tracing of it, and that you can find on a Dropbox link. If in the video description below, you'll see a link to a Dropbox site. And if you click on the most recent one, number 8, you'll see a bunch of files here. So the file that we were just looking at, we have the outline. There's also a PDF version if that's easier to print out. This is the illustration. This is a digital illustration that I did, merging a photo of a book with the illustration. And here's the actual original painting by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is, this is, when I saw this, I was like, wow, that is really cool. I had no idea he was making this kind of stuff. And it turns out this is also one of his favorite illustrations. So, let's just take a quick little visit. I want to show you a few other things. There is a private Facebook group that is just for people that are doing these classes, and you can see it's very active. There's people who are making painting, like look at this, cool. I love this. I haven't seen that one yet. So this is the painting we made in our master study class just on Tuesday. Cool. And so some of these are paintings that we were making. Oh, that's funny. Just recently. And people are also uploading the paintings that they're working on their own. people are also taking other classes with other artists on YouTube or elsewhere and sharing their work in this group. I think that doesn't bother me. The more people that are making art, the happier the world would be. So whatever people are painting makes me very, very happy. So let's just take a quick little look here. Tolkien Reading Day, I think, began in about 10 years ago. And this is the Tolkien Society, people who are obviously big fans of J.R.R. Tolkien. And there's some different kinds of things that here's some strategies down here. Reading the books, talking about the books. And I think it was chosen March 25th because March 25th, 3019, is a significant day within the canon that Tolkien created, because that's when Sauron was destroyed, or when the ring was thrown into the fire at the very end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Or if you've seen, is it the Fellowship of the Ring? The final installment of the Lord of the Rings film has that scene. Just a quick little look at Tolkien. One of the things I think people don't really realize, or even I forget, even though I've read almost all of his books, is that he lived until 1973. He was 81 years old when he passed away. But when I think of his books, I think they were written maybe in the 1700s or 1800s, and that they're these documents from long time ago, when in reality he wrote most of these books in the 30s and 40s, 50s. But I think he would be very happy that a lot of people think, or maybe it's just me, think that his books were written earlier than they actually were, because that was a big part of his goal, was to create a mythology for the people of England and Britain. Because, and this, we can go into this whole long story, there isn't a lot of the history, and early myths in England were lost because of various different invasions by other people over the centuries. So part of his goal was to sort of fabricate and fill in the blanks where none had really existed. And I just think that that's a really interesting thing. It's very inspiring to think of being able to create something like that of my own or of your own. Anyway, we'll just take a look at this painting. There's a link to this in the video description below, where you could see all the, well, not all, but a pretty good selection of the images that were in those books that I was going to show you. Like, this is the cover to The Hobbit, which he illustrated himself. I didn't realize that this was a Tolkien painting that he did. There is, of course, endless volumes of art that other people have made based on his books. Paintings, drawings, sculptures, and of course Peter Jackson's films. And he wasn't the first one to make a live action or animated version. There was a Ralph Bakshi, if anyone's a fan of animation, made a really great, I think it's a Lord of the Rings, I think it's a Lord of the Rings that he made. He only made one movie. I think he was planning to do the trilogy, but they're quite a involved process. So today's the painting that we're going to make is from chapter 9. Oh, it says right here. It's funny. Yeah, chapter 9 of The Hobbit, Barrels Out of Bond, and it's when Bilbo frees the dwarves from the wood elves, and they go on this adventure rafting down the river to escape. And it's a great scene from the book, but many of you probably are wondering, well, which movie is it in, so that maybe I could get the Cliff's Notes of that. So that is included. It's about midway through, if I remember, from The Hobbit, the part 2 of The Hobbit. Remember, they split The Hobbit into a trilogy as well, just so they could make a lot of money. If you want to see that, you can kind of just Google, what did I Google? YouTube, barrel, bond, Hobbit, and there's sort of 3 parts that you can watch. The first part is the escape from the elves dungeon, and then I won't play any of this because it'll get, my video will get taken down. But it is a pretty amazing scene. Obviously, Peter Jackson is a great director, and so I put the link in the scrolling comment section there. If you want to pause this and go and watch the video, it might inspire you to get really excited about making today's painting. So let's get right to it here. Again, this is the illustration that I did. If you want to paint the original, you can go ahead and paint the original. It doesn't offend me or anything. I just thought, wouldn't it be, we could just paint the Tolkien image, but since it is Tolkien reading day, I thought, wouldn't it be kind of fun for that painting to be exploding out of a book? So let's get right to it. And I thought maybe there are a few things I wanted to cover right off the top, because I am almost out of gessoed canvases. I would just do a quick little gesso right now. So the way that so let's show you. Is it this one? Okay. So I use these little painter's pyramids. You can get these at Home Depot or any art supply store. I like them because you can kind of, prop up your artwork on a thing like this, so that especially if you don't want to get paint on a basically if you get paint on the back side, you don't have to worry about getting on the table or anything like that. So I thought I would just break this out because I got to do a whole bunch of these. And is this one of the new ones? Yes, this is an ungessoed, a brand new one that I got. If you want to get that brand, that's the one that I have ordered. And the link to that is in the video description below. I have to increase the brightness of that light there. It's a little bit dim. It was a little bright last episode, so I decided to dim it, and then of course it's a little bit too dark. So anyway, I'm going to take this panel and just put a little bit of gesso on here so it comes out in a big blob. And so this is, usually when I'm doing this, I do like as many as I can all at once. So I'll just put a whole bunch of newspaper down on the floor, gesso a dozen canvases or more, and just let them dry overnight. And then, as you've seen on previous episodes, I sand them down. So the most important thing is just to really cover it. I don't care about any streaks or anything like that, because again, if I sand it and I do a reasonable job sanding it, these streaks will disappear. And this is just a cheap paintbrush from Home Depot or your hardware store. So there we go. It's a very simple gessoing of a canvas. And I'll just put, again, I'm not going to do 20 canvases right now, but this one I can use for class next week. And this is just your, let's just move this out of the way. Yikes. This is just your standard white gesso. They do make black gesso, and if you wanted, you could mix paint a color into the gesso if you wanted. I've never really heard of anybody doing it, but there's nothing, it wouldn't be, I can't imagine, I don't think it would compromise the paint in any way whatsoever. Okay, you know what, I'm just going to take a second and brighten that light because it's driving me nuts. Okay, there we go. Now I feel like I'm on camera. There it was. Okay, cool. Just making sure microphone's on. Sometimes when I turn the microphone off to do something, everything goes. Okay, so here's the printout again of the tracing that I did of the illustration I created based on Tolkien's illustration. Mouthful there. So I'm just going to get my paints out. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put down a one color to get started, because we're basically doing like a landscape painting. And when we do a landscape, often people use like a warm brown or warm yellow for this. Oh, the other thing I was going to show, since I just did talking about gessoing. So I usually, to sand, I use a 2020 grit sandpaper. And one thing I often, and actually this was tearing a little bit, and what I often will do anyways, I just put a little bit of tape on the back of sandpaper. Because often sandpaper can tear a little bit and it can be really frustrating, so I put a little bit of tape on the back to keep a little bit, and I'm going to staple this using a staple gun. That way I don't have to. Okay, so let's try to fold that. Okay. If anybody, sorry, that was probably loud. Anyone not paying attention is fully awake right now. Okay. So now I've got like a block that I can use for sanding. And I'd probably, rather than going this way, right, that might tear it. I'm just going to go this way. That's good. I think you can see how much, wow. What a difference. I've been using the same old piece of sandpaper for the past 50 episodes, and I think that was one of the reasons why I had so much problem last week, because it didn't really create that smooth of a surface, and I got the paint just sort of sticking in the little holes, or the weave of the canvas. So anyway, let's, I'm going to trace parts of this image onto the canvas. I'm not going to do all of the details because we're going to paint over all of the details. So a lot of it would just be needless extra work. Now obviously if I'm painting, this is a 9.5 by 11 canvas, or 12, sorry, 9 by 12 canvas. So, and this is an 8.5 by 11 printer or piece of photocopy paper, so you can decide where you want it. I think I'm gonna go down a little bit so that I've got, because there's not much interesting I mean, you can certainly do all sorts of interesting stuff down here, but so let's put the paper right up against the bottom edge, also because that's going to help me get these lines straight there. Okay, volume still good? Okay, good. So, and to do that, I'm going to use carbon paper. We've talked about this, I don't know, 50 times already, but again, usually half of the people that are watching the show are new viewers, so I appreciate everyone's patience when I repeat myself a little bit. So, and I'm going to use a red pencil to do this tracing. I've talked about how to do this quite extensively. Probably the one where I showed a number of different examples was the Andy Warhol episode in the intro painting class that I taught from September of 2020 until February of this year. So the most important things with this image here are really the book, the shape of the book. I don't even need to worry about the let's say the lines inside where the pages are, because, well, I mean, I could do a few of them just if that's helpful to, but then let's just make sure it's working. Yep. See how the lines are being transferred onto the canvas? Upstairs are my mom has flown in from Calgary to help take care of our daughter while I'm on the show here. So it's the first time my mom has been with our daughter since last summer when my wife and I drove out to Calgary. And what's kind of nice to hear is our daughter running around and doing her joyous screams while Grandma is taking care of her. It means everything is going well. When our daughter's making lots of noise and running around, that's a good thing. She doesn't do too much whining or crying or complaining. Pencil broke. We are pretty blessed, that's for sure. You've seen our daughter on camera here a few times. Again, so I'm not going to do, I'm just kind of simplifying things. I'm not trying to do both lines to the width of the tree. Really, I do this kind of thing just to help with composition. You know, I was even actually, up until even last night, as I was drawing this image, I was thinking, yeah, you know what, I'll eyeball today's episode and maybe just put this up on the Dropbox for anybody who wants the extra help. And then I thought, you know what, there's a lot of detail in this image, and it's going to take a bit of time to paint it all. And by the time I draw all of this in, and that's going to take an hour to do, and I don't know, it seems like a little bit of a fool's errand here, so I'm just going to simplify a few things here, also because I'm simplifying things not only because I'm going to paint over a lot of these details, but also some of these details are so small that, quite frankly, I'm not going to really paint all the small details. I'm just going to omit them entirely. So, you know, all of these circles in the sky, I'll have to think about how I want to paint these in my own style. Also, if I bring back the original, you can see, if I look at, here's the original, you can see the top of the image ends kind of right here. And I used a function in Photoshop called Content Aware Fill, which is kind of this magical thing that uses artificial intelligence to fill in or multiply parts of the painting or drawing or photograph. So a lot of this stuff up here was invented by the computer, by Photoshop. It kind of assessed this narrow band of the tops of the trees and then created its own version of them above. And you could see there's a few little weird gaps there. So all of this, you know, how much do you want to rely on Photoshop to help you, and how much do you just want to invent on your own? And of course, you could put other things up there. You could put a word, like you could put a title, you could write The Hobbit up there, you could put your favorite character up there, or, I mean, maybe there's a sun setting up there. All sorts of creative things that you could do there if you don't want to paint more and more foliage in the sky. There is another tree here. I might just omit that tree just for the sake of simplicity, or simplifying the image. You know, and a bunch of these wave shapes here. I'm just going to simplify. I'll just refer to the original as we go. This little, what do you call these? Is it a bookmark? You know, like that little piece of fabric that is often in older books or journals. I was just thought, like, because I think in the original photo there was something coming out of the book here, and I thought, what if we just turn the waves into a like they kind of spill off the edge and turn into a bookmark or something. Okay, I think I'll just do a few more things here, and then we'll fill that in. Oh, I want to get this horizon line in here. Oh, and there's a little bit of this. And we'll see, like, as we start painting it, you know, there is a little bit of a weirdness as I was doing this. You know, this would be technically the spine of the book. Do you want things curving in there? I don't know. All of it will, I think, make sense as we do it. So I'm just going to leave a bunch of that stuff up there, and I'll just paint it as we go. Right, and you can see when I pull the paint, everything goes like, whoa, that's a little bit, I've lost a lot of detail. Oops, there were a few little fellows on boats down here. I think this is Bilbo on his boat, or not a boat, the wine barrel. They escape from the wood elves' dungeon on these wine barrels, and Peter Jackson did a pretty good job of illustrating that scene. So if you want to watch that. Okay, I think it's pretty good. Okay, so let's move this out of the way. Ooh, New Zealand. That would be, you know, obviously they filmed a lot of the Lord of the Rings in New Zealand. I would love to go there. It actually reminds me a lot of Canada. In its own way, like in many different ways New Zealand does. I don't know, just a totally random thing, non sequitur, but I may have mentioned these things before because sometimes people ask me about cleaning brushes. I just brought them over here while I was setting up. This is the brush cleaner that I often use. I think there's a link to this in the video description below. This has been well used. I've had this for, gosh, maybe 10 years, and it's lasted. You know, there's this little cake in there, and so it's slowly gone down. I think this is it's probably like $15 or something at an art supply store, often right by the front counter as like a little thing to get. But this I usually put on my brushes when I'm cleaning my brushes at the end of the day. And then they also make a hand soap, which I love. This is a great hand soap that I use, you know, after if you've used any kind of chemical or I use it for oil paint, because if I get oil paint on my hands, you know, I don't really want to use turpentine on my bare skin to get the paint off, or any other kind of oil. You put that on, soap, it just goes right down the drain, and it's got kind of like aloe or something in there, moisturizer, which is just nice to use on your hands. Anyway, okay, long story short, Michael, let's get right to the painting. I'm going to put some paint on here. Donna says, but had Edie been painting? I probably missed a whole bunch of the conversation going down there already. I haven't, you know, surprisingly done all that much painting with our daughter yet. Although, where is it? Oh yeah, here it is. Probably about a year ago, my daughter and I made this. I'm going to make another, film another sequence where we did this. But basically, I just took some paper, put some paint on the paper, and then put it in the Ziploc bag. And then our daughter stomped on it and clawed at it and smushed the paint all over the place. And then the idea is you just, you know, open up the Ziploc bag, and then you just slide it out and you've got a painting in there. And it doesn't require any cleanup of any little kid's hands or feet because it's all inside the Ziploc bag. I can't take credit for coming up with that idea. It's something I saw online and was like, oh, that's brilliant. I'm going to take that and try it. But I kind of like it so much in that Ziploc. I still haven't taken it out of the Ziploc. I just kind of think it's so neat. Anyway, okay. So on this surface, I'm going to prime it with a color, and just thinking out loud to myself, what I'm probably going to do is paint, I want to look for like a light color that might be glowing through here. So I kind of like what's happening in here. It looks sort of like a cool yellow or a cool white, or sorry, a cool yellow or a warm yellow with some white in it. And obviously we've got this, and this is a bit of this is my own invention, this orange in the background. I just kind of liked the idea of that, you know, like a sunset or sunrise beaming through the trees. So let's get some white out here. Although I probably don't, I always make the mistake of putting too much white in my paint when I do these washes, and it often obscures a lot of the image. So I am probably going to make the same mistake right now. But you know what okay, maybe do I have to, I don't have too big of a brush. You've probably seen me throwing out some of these brushes. These are the brushes that I opened, well, not all of them, but most of them I opened back in September and made 60 paintings at this point with them. And some of the larger ones that I often use for those washes, I've thrown out because they were at the end of their life cycle, which is not unusual. Even a good brush, like if you spend $100 on a really nice horsehair brush, that'll probably last you, 50 years. But if you spend $5 on a brush, it's going to last you, maybe 6 months or less, right? Which is what you would expect, anyway. So let's take I'm going to take this warm yellow. Often artists, when they're doing landscapes, will use an earthy, warm color as a wash. So if I make this thin enough, it'll be like as if I put white into the paint anyway. So I added quite a lot of water in there, probably at least 1-to-1 water to warm yellow. And I think I'm just going to paint this directly on there. I was thinking about maybe adding a little bit of red to it to make it even more orange, but I think this will be more than good enough here. So let's just quickly paint this on here. Oh, I got a couple little chunky things. Not sure what that's from. Probably stuff that was stuck on my paintbrush or deep inside the paintbrush, because maybe I didn't clean this brush well enough after my most recent, after I used it most recently. So another good reason to clean your brushes properly, besides saving them from falling apart on you, is that you don't get little weird things that dry up inside the brush and come out onto the next painting. And you've seen it happen to me a few times where things, those little, I don't know what you would call them, little friends from the past make an appearance. Okay. So that works pretty well. Like, I mean, if I added more water to it, it would get a little bit thinner and would sort of optically mix with the white of the canvas. And it would cover up these pencil lines even better. Or if I want, you know, but maybe I don't want that to happen. Maybe I'm struggling to see some of those lines. So that's pretty good. Okay, so just wipe this off. Put it in the water. And Heidi's back from the vet. I saw earlier a comment about your fur baby needing a checkup, so I hope that went well, Heidi. Hopefully your little one is healthy and happy. And I'm just gonna do this now. I got this brand new cutting mat, which is fantastic, but it is a real pain to clean because it's, you know, huge, and even though I've got a pretty big sink here in the studio, it still doesn't fit in there. Okay, so let's blow dry this to hurry up this process. Okay. Oh, still waiting for the results. Oh my goodness. I hope, fingers crossed, we're all rooting for you, Heidi. Grew up with dogs, and you know, I know what it's like to have a sick animal. It is. I also have a child as well. I wouldn't say they're exactly the same, but it is nevertheless, like, I mean, they become part of your family, don't they? Okay. I'll wait before I put some more back. Okay, so if it's not clear to you, I'm generally am making all of this up on the spot, right? So I both just because I'm super busy, but also because I guess I trust my own ability to kind of examine an artwork and try to figure out how it's done, and I'll just do it while we're painting. And I think it's also, I like to think that me trying to figure these things out in front of other people can also help people understand the thought process of trying to create your own painting. So I've got this warm yellow. You know, for some people this might be a little bit bright, but I personally prefer having a brighter image to start with, and then if I want, I can kind of tamp it down a little bit and mute it rather than trying to brighten it up. I think it's always easier to darken than it is to brighten. So I've got this nice kind of warm yellow. The other thing too is it's kind of locked some of the pencil marks in here, so it's less likely to smudge when I do the subsequent layers on top of here. And also, now that I've got this painted, even if I, let's say, ran out of time and didn't have a chance to paint some of the yellow that's coming in between these, behind the branches and stuff, it's already yellow, right? So it's at that point, it's really only how much more, or if I want to do anything more on top of it. I'm thinking to myself that what I might do is paint start actually above and painting some of this area, and then kind of working my way down with some of the green. So let's say the way I would probably do this, let's say we paint a first kind of layer of green, and maybe just a whole bunch of green, maybe not even worrying too much about these details. Let me think about that. The next thing I would do, you know, and bring some of that green and do some of the green down here, is probably then start working on the water, do the brown in the branches, maybe on the table, should I decide to make it a table. You could turn this into a, I don't know, it could be all sorts of other things. I was looking at other pictures that had hands in them, and I thought, you know what, that might be an extra layer too far. Trying to make another element of somebody holding the book might be just a bridge too far, as they say. So let's start mixing some green. And if we look at that image, that green is a fairly saturated, fairly bright green. It kind of has a little bit more of a cooler quality to it. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use a cool green using cool yellow and cool blue. And maybe a little bit of white in there as well. Okay, so let's scoop some yellow out and get that onto the brush. Let's get some, so that was my cool yellow. Let's get my cool blue out here. Let's try a small amount. You see, I'm not putting too much paint on, and I put it to the side. And then let's mix it here. And I think it should also, you know, people who've been painting with me for a while probably have seen that I paint relatively thin. Both because it dries much faster, and that way, especially on camera, I can work through the painting a little faster. Also, if I make a mistake, I haven't used too much paint. And then the another big reason why I like to do that is it's going to force me to mix that color again and again and again and again, which is really great for learning, but it's also going to create a little bit more variation and variety in the colors that I'm using, so that I don't just have one big solid flat area of color, which, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, as they would say in Seinfeld, not that there's anything wrong with that, but just in the way that I like to paint, I want more variation and variety. And as I look at this image, I think I might try to do some shapes while I'm here. So let's just sort of investigate. We can even kind of play with this, because I may have to do a few coats of paint on here. So let's see, what if I just sort of do little shapes up here? I'll probably have to switch to a smaller brush in a moment, but oh, sorry, you can't see anything I'm doing here. Okay, so you see I'm just sort of putting some color up here. Okay, and then I'm just going to mix some paint in here, and we'll get a bit of a darker color. And let's just try that. In his version of the painting, you see that there's like, he kind of outlines things with white, which I think maybe I'll do that. I think I'll do a little bit of it anyway. And since I'm going to outline things, I don't really mind. I'm just going to go right up to each of these things and just paint right up to the shapes, rather than leaving little gaps or spaces. You can see I'm moving around the canvas as I do this, rather than just sort of staying in one place. You know, or working my way right down. I'm just going to move all over. And I find just what I want to do is just fill up the canvas as quickly as possible, and then get to the, then I can just sort of refine and move things around, change colors. That's my favorite part of making a painting. And the quicker I can get there, the better. Some people spend a lot of, like, really, you know, tinkering in small areas of the painting, and I'm gonna mix a little bit more. Let's put a little bit of white in here. I think that's what a lot of people, when they're first starting to paint, do, is they spend way too much time at this stage of the painting. And you're going to have to do a bunch of touching up anyway at some point. So, you know, it's sort of a waste of time to do it at this stage. Just like, let's just fill it in. Get these trees, these bunches, all this foliage painted in. And even, you know, like, there are smaller parts of these leaves that I could paint with a smaller brush. But I think I'm going to just paint the big areas. And then when I come back to do, like, the little tiny white lines, I'll probably divide things up there and then have to do a bunch of touching up. So let's just save that to that when I get to that place. And, you know, my color is now a lot more, you know, some of this light green, the first green that I put down there is not really in his version of the painting. Right, so you decide, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I might leave a little bit more, a few gaps, even higher up in the sky there, where the sun is coming through. So okay. Let me see. I'll do just a few more. That's, I think, good enough. Okay, so now let's try to do some of that same green down below. I'm going to mix. We're going to put a bit of this cool green, and then I'm going to mix a lot more of a warm green as well. I think I'm going to just shift to a smaller brush. Okay, so I got that. I'm just going to now take this, it's going to add a bit of white to it. Okay, let's take a bit of blue, a bit more blue, and add some white to it. You know, don't worry about making all of this perfect right now. You see, I'm just going pretty darn quickly through here. I'm gonna add other colors over top of some of this. Really just trying to fill in as much as possible. I'm just gonna make this a little bit more bluish. I'm going to take this same blue that I just mixed, just put a few little bits of blue up in here. Even just painting over some of these other areas inside the trees itself. Okay. Not bad. Okay, pretty happy so far. Let's see. What should we do next here? I think I'm going to take some warm blue. I'm going to mix some warm blue, and we'll start doing some of the foreground stuff. So here's a warm blue. And how about I'm just going to turn this right around to my warm yellow. So warm blue and warm yellow. It's obviously much darker because they're going pretty much right across the color wheel from one another. So where should we, let's see how this works. I think we need a bit more yellow in here. So this is much more of like a muted, grassy green, right? You know, compared to this is basically all this was cool greens, and then here's my warm green, right? What a difference! And I'm just going to lay this in a whole bunch of places, even though these aren't technically the correct colors. I'm barely looking at the original here. Okay. Where else? I'll just put... I'm going to add a bit of white to this color. I'm going to put it a little bit further back. I'm just going to paint over this whole thing in here. I probably won't get much detail in there anyway, so... blue on top of some of this. This is almost like basically a gray, right? You see how, you know, again, I don't want to repeat myself too much. Hold up, let me see. Let's go back to, let's get this view. So, you know, the color we were just mixing here was warm yellow with warm blue. And look how it's not directly across the color wheel, so it's not a true complementary color, but they are pretty darn close. And as I'm mixing these two colors across the color wheel, they get close to the neutral core. And you can see I just added white to that color, and it basically became gray, right? So it was kind of like this color, add white to it, and boom, it goes gray. Versus the green that I mixed before was in these areas, right? Their two colors are much closer to each other on the color wheel. So that's why they're so much more saturated colors. And I don't mind that these colors are gray because, as I said, I'm going to paint some blue over top of it. So if anything, it's going to kind of block out a bit of this yellow so that the blue that I get will be more blue and less gray, right? This is actually not a bad color to paint some of the trees in here, because he's painted them gray. So you know what? Maybe I'll do that. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of red in here. That's a little much. But if I add a little bit of red to this color, which is my warm red, my warm yellow, and my warm blue, they are going to make a warm brown. Right, add just a little bit of white to it. going to be kind of a warm brown gray. And so my goal here is just to lay a pretty good quick foundation. Like if you were painting a landscape painting like a Tom Thompson or A.Y. Jackson or a Emily Carr painting, this would be fairly similar to how they would have worked, right? You're just sort of quickly laying in some color, and then as you go, you can complicate it, and right now just like got a little, there's some wet paint that I'm dragging my brush through. It doesn't bother me. I'm not going to get every tree branch in here, just the bigger ones. Okay. Because I think I will come back and do a little bit of painting in of the yellow in the background. That is another thing that the group of 7 artists would do as well. Heidi says, some moms say sometimes their fur kids are better than their other kids. Fur kids are probably a lot easier to discipline than less hairy babies. Human babies, at least our daughter, she's a very independent child who pretty much could, she's only 19 months, but she could, at this point already, could care less about what we have to say or do. So, where she doesn't really, is not interested in our approval about anything. So, I think definitely having a fur baby would be is a creature that is maybe more can often be a little bit more friendly or than a human baby, and even though both of them require an adult human to feed them, ours anyway is a pretty feisty little kid. Okay, let's okay, so what I'm gonna actually, you know what, this gray that I've just been using for the trees, and remember, just as a reminder again, the way that I made this gray was just warm yellow, warm red, warm blue. I mixed them together, different sort of, you know, obviously the more blue or the more red or the more yellow you put into your mixture, you're going to get slightly different results. But, you know, I think mostly what this was the warm blue and the warm yellow, just a tiny bit of warm red. And when I added the white to it, it became a gray. Now, it doesn't surprise me that happens, but I do find when I'm teaching in classes, people are very surprised by that. They're just like, but I didn't use any black. Why did this go gray? It doesn't make any sense. Why isn't it just like a baby blue? Because I had, you know, blue with a little bit of white should go kind of bright blue, right? And you have to explain to them that all those colors basically any time you're using three so-called primary colors, a blue, a red, and a yellow, they're all from different points of the color wheel, right? So what really doesn't matter which one you use. If you're using any three colors like this, then they're all, on opposite sides of the color wheel, and therefore they're sucking your color in towards the neutral core, and which is where you've got any combination of them is going to make a quite dark. What I usually tell people is if you mix these three colors together, you're going to get a brown, assuming you have more of two colors than one. So you'll get a brown, whether it's going to be a blue brown or a red brown or a yellow brown. Just you're adding a little bit more of that color. If you use equal amounts of them, you're going to get pretty dark. And then the way to get the darkest color on your palette is just to add another one of your blues, so that then you're sort of, because the blues are the darker colors on your palette, at least the palette that I'm using. You could use a lighter blue, but so then you're getting about as close to a black as you possibly can, and we'll probably use that in this painting. Anyway, Michael, I'm just going to use this gray, and I'm going to paint it right over the pages of the book here, because it's kind of in shadow. Remember, we have our light is coming from over the quote-unquote horizon that is behind these trees, so that it would be casting a shadow towards us, right? Even though we're not, this is a fantasy image. Most books don't have trees and rivers flowing out of them, but the more that we add a level of believability to the image, I think the more surreal it becomes. I'm just taking the same color. I haven't washed my brush, putting lots of white on it, and I'm just going to put that white on the side of these pages here. As the paint dries, the yellow is going to come through a bit more again. Do I need any more white at this stage? I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a bit of, I'm going to take some of the cool, sorry, you didn't even see what I just did. Right, I just took the white that I made, and I just painted it on here. So it wasn't totally white. It was the same color that I had on my brush that I did this. I just added a little bit more white. I didn't want total, perfect, bright white. I never really want pure white until really close to the end of the painting. And then I use those kind of like pops for highlights. Okay, so now I've just took some of the cool yellow, and I'm going to put that on my brush. Add some white to it. And I'm going to paint this area here with the cool white light. So this would be kind of the pages of the book. And kind of the water. So I'm just going to paint. I'm going to paint really the water this color. In fact, let's go in here. Even though this is a shadow, we'll change this color of the water later. So you can see like the speed that I'm painting all of this, and kind of the relative carelessness of which I'm doing it, right? I'm not you know, I'm not being precious at all with the painting at this stage. I really am just trying to really quickly get as much paint on here as possible, and then we'll get into the details. And as I said, like, that I think is one of the biggest mistakes that I see people doing. And when I'm teaching classes, there's always one or two people that, you know, if we're painting a painting like this, that are still like doing beautiful fine line of the tree. And I'm like, whoa, okay, well, let's pick up the pace, because you're gonna, all of that fine, beautiful detail work you're doing right now is perhaps going to get obliterated at some point and then you're going to be so frustrated because you'll be like, oh, I spent all this time making a beautiful line, and now you're telling me it's like, oh, right? So if we just sort of get the paint on there, and this is the way I paint. There are other people I've seen who do classes online, or I've taken classes with people who do very, like, we would still be painting this corner up here, doing a really beautiful thing and outlining it with white. There's nothing wrong with other people's methods. I'm just showing you how I do it. Take it or leave it. Okay, so I'm just gonna now, let's say, paint the spine of this book. So let's get a darker color, and this is basically just the same paint that I had on my brush. It was kind of a gray, and now I'm just painting the same gray with the warm blue, my ultramarine blue, and so I've got kind of a pretty dark gray here. Let's take extra paint off of my brush, and I'm gonna get a slightly smaller brush here. I think to myself often, like, when people take classes with me and then maybe they take another class with somebody else, and then some teacher comes around and is like, what on earth are you doing? And I'm like, oh, this is, I took a class with this guy, Michael Markowsky, and this is the way he does things. And so I just been following, and they're like, what? That guy's an idiot. Like, stop listening to whatever he says. Like, they're like, that's odd. Because I do think it's important for people to remember that there's no one way to make a painting. And hopefully, if you've been with me for a while, I've even done the same painting several different ways so that people can see the different options that are available to you when you're painting. And that's one of the things sometimes at the beginning of the class, I'll be like, okay, here's a few different ways that we could approach this. Which way do I want to go right now? And there's been times where in the class I have potentially chosen the wrong way, like a choose-your-own-adventure book, right? And you're like, oh, maybe I could have done it differently. But, often you don't know which way is the best way until you're halfway down the path. And then you're like, oh, okay, this is exactly what not to do. But as I've said many times, is if you make a quote-unquote mistake and you just throw the painting away because you're unhappy and it goes into the garbage, then that is just a waste. Then it's like, I wasted my time. This is garbage. But if you look at it and you're able to kind of understand what went wrong and how you can learn from it and make a different decision if you were to do the painting again, or when you approach a different painting, then it's actually been super productive. Like, I often think we learn the most from our mistakes than when we do from our successes, right? That's why, just as a tiny little diversion that has nothing to do with anything, why I personally enjoy watching sports. Because I find like it's actually very inspiring seeing how people handle defeat and struggle than it is from watching teams succeed. Like it's great to watch some like Tom Brady or some football player who wins all the time. That's exciting. But it's also really exciting to see people who've been like failing and failing and failing and failing all of a sudden start to kind of figure it out. And then isn't it so much more satisfying? And I think, just seeing some of the comments of other people in the chat from previous videos and on the artworks you guys make is when you rescue a painting you've been wrestling with for a while, and from when it just seemed like all is lost, and you've pulled it out of the depths of like Mordor. Speaking of Lord of the Rings, it's just like, oh wow, it's so empowering because you feel like I can do anything. If I can rescue this painting that was a total disaster, then there's nothing that can hold me back. Speaking of which, let's move on. Let's paint. So basically now I'm just going to make a brown. I think I'm going to make this a table, a wooden table, and I'll show you how to do a little bit of a wood effect as well. So to do that, let's take some yellow, the warm yellow. I'm going to take a bit of warm red. So now we've got it orange, right? I think I'm going to need more yellow. And then I'm going to take some warm blue again. Right? Immediately we got a brown. Right? Because all three corners of the so then right now this is a very orangey brown. Right? This kind of reminds me of Suzanne Valadon's cat. Remember we did that back in probably late September in our painting class, right? So if you want it to be a little bit more darker brown, we'll add a bit more blue to this mixture. Right? If you still find it too red, then we can add a little bit more yellow. Because the more yellow we add to it, especially if there's blue, the more greenish that brown is going to go. Okay. That's pretty good. It's kind of a bit of a darker brown. So I'm going to take that dark brown. I think I'm going to, let's just paint this right here. Also, what I'm doing is, often when I get to an edge, I just take my brush and I go right up to an edge. You see me just sort of like, I don't know what this reminds me of. I just sort of rub my brush back and forth. Rather than trying to kind of go this way, I can just kind of I don't know what that motion reminds me of. I find this is a great way of getting close into some details, and it also really helps get the paint into the weave of the canvas. It's sort of like you're burnishing it or something. I don't know how else to describe that. And then once I've got it, then I do come back and just sort of clean it up, the brush stroke. And it looks like I did a much better job. Okay. As you know, I like to get the sides of the painting in there. Okay. Oops, just wipe that away. If you can do it quickly, you can just wipe, assuming the paint that is next to it is dry, you can just take your finger or a cloth and wipe the problem away. I feel like that's an infomercial waiting to be made. Are you tired of getting paint in the wrong places? Just wipe it away. The other thing, too, at this early stage, I often will deliberately use a bigger brush. Because the bigger brush forces me to tackle bigger areas of the canvas and not to get into the trap of doing detail work too early into the process. Right? Because there's just no way, like when I can't get all these little parts behind these trees perfectly well. And so by using a bigger brush, it just like, I'm just forced to paint kind of quickly and not obsess over being perfect here, so. Okay, coolness. So, I'll let that dry. What should we do next? Yeah, like so for about, what we've been painting for about an hour. And this would be like a great place to get to if you were trying to make an underpainting or something, right? We've got like the majority of everything in place. We've got basically all the colors we need in place. And then now we can start really refining these details. So, just gonna move this out of the way for a second. Wipe this mat down. You'd be surprised how difficult it is to clean this stuff later on when acrylic dries. I'm sure some of you have encountered that same sort of thing when if you've got paint on your, well, if it's on your canvas or on your table or even on your clothes. If it gets on your clothes and you don't want it to be on your clothes, you've got like 10 seconds before that stain will set. So run to the sink. I've like had that happen in classes where somebody shows up like direct from work and they've got a nice sweater on and they're like, oh, I just got some paint on my shirt. Like, what should I do? I'm like, get to the sink. You know, it's like a bomb that must be diffused. You know, one place I'd love to visit, speaking of just looking at New Zealand in the chat there, would be the Hobbit village that they created for the Lord of the Rings. It's kind of amazing that more people don't have earth, what do they call it? Earth huts or earth homes, where your house is underground, and then you have like grass growing on the roof. Like, you know, in all seriousness, like when you think about like all the kind of wasted space on our roofs where you could be planting a garden and picking your own fruit and vegetables, instead we just have these, like our neighbors right next door getting their the roof redone there, and there's guys up on the roof pounding away from sunrise to sunset, and you know, it just costs a fortune to get a new roof. Anyway, So I'm just going to blow dry this really quickly. Everything looks like it's drying at a pretty good pace, but why not just set everything in before I move on to the next step? Okay, so I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some white on my brush with a small brush, and I'm going to start outlining features in the trees, and then because what's going to end up happening is I'm going to have to probably paint 2 layers of white, and just because when the white dries, it's going to go a little bit more transparent. So I'm going to paint this first one, and I can start kind of really defining the shapes of the leaves up here. And then as that's drying, I can then start really putting in the colors that I really want up here. Again, that's why I just did this really quickly. I'm probably going to use some of these forms as my ultimately where the shapes are going to go, but I don't have to obey this structure, right? Okay, so I'm just going to take some pure white and get that on my brush. And then let's look at this again. One of the nice things about his image is these overlapping shapes and forms. So we want to try to capture a little bit of that, which makes things a little bit more complicated. But and I'm going to probably start closer to the top, and then I'm going to kind of work my way down, just so that way I'm not getting my hand over any wet paint. But also, especially, it's working on the outside edges can also be kind of nice, because if I make a mistake, it's not right in the middle of the painting. You know, when people are looking at paintings, generally it's the middle, or when they look at a painting, generally their eyes are going to go towards some feature in the center and then slowly work their way out. So if I make any mistakes, I'd rather them be on the outer edges. And I'm going to do my testing around those outer edges. Okay. So I'm going to take my brush and looking at the original. What can we do? Just sort of outline some of the shapes that I created. And I may, again, paint other colors inside these shapes. And this could be a time-consuming process doing all of this. So again, you decide how much of this kind of work you want to do. I am going to add a little bit of slow dry medium on here. Slow dry medium is going to make it a little bit easier to paint because it's going to be a little bit more fluid and less kind of chunky. You know, white can get, because it's thicker, or it's more opaque. Sometimes it is a little bit harder to get those nice fine lines. So you can, I would use that rather than adding water. Again, the other thing is, I mean, it is going to make it a little bit more transparent, which can be kind of frustrating. But again, I'm probably going to have to paint this area again anyway. So if I'm going to have to do it a second time, then at least when I do it, it's going to be a more pleasurable painting experience. The other thing too, so these white, or these shapes, they don't all have to be going from the top and bottom. We can also put some shapes on top going forward, right? If that makes any sense. So feel free to kind of explore, you know, as you go around here. I often will kind of move around whenever I'm making any painting. As you see, I'll kind of start in one place, paint for 5 minutes, and then I'll move to a different place. You can see as I'm going, my width of these white lines tends to get a little bit wider as my patience kind of wanes. I'm like, let's just go faster. So it's up to you how kind of detailed you want to make your painting. Now, I think when he painted this, he did it, I think this is a watercolor painting that he made. I think he did draw it all out and then painted carefully within the lines, which would be a very time-consuming process. But it yields good results. Generally, you know, painting does often reward your patience, right? If you take your time while you're making a painting, the results tend to be better than if you're rushing through it, trying to get it done as quickly as possible. But I also do think that sometimes people are surprised by the quality of their paintings when they do go a little bit faster. They think like, oh, I need to spend 20 hours working on this painting, and I got to go very slow and make it absolutely perfect. And then when they're in my painting class and I go, okay, you got 5 minutes to do that whole area that you plan on taking a month to do. Right? They're like, what? Oh no. And then they start painting it, and then they get something in there in 5 minutes. Obviously, it's not as good as they were hoping it would be, but it's actually usually nowhere near as bad as they think it was going to be. And that's usually a kind of a big surprise to people, is they're like, oh, you know, just like when we painted all of these shapes here really quickly. You know, I was actually expecting to do a lot, you know, that, you know, I could, even after this layer's done, I could walk away from these trees. I like how it's looking so far. Does it look exactly like Tolkien's original? Not really. But If you know me, that's not really much of a concern or consideration for me. See, even the yellow that I had in the background, I don't mind it so much now that I'm outlining it. I may decide to make it a little bit more orangey as we go, but we'll see. And that's another important point too, is rather, I don't know what that sky is going to need until more of the colors start filling out the rest of the painting. So rather than spend a bunch of time really focusing on that part of the painting, because I might have to change it anyway, I just move forward and go like, okay, well, this will be my placeholder for right now. If it, I can try to get it as, a reasonable good job now. But if I don't like it, I'm going to change it, and I'm not going to be too upset. And this is sort of the opposite of doing black outlines. Right? We've done black outlines on things like Hokusai's Great Wave. And you can see how well, like, putting black outlines on shapes works. It really helps resolve a picture and make it, it just makes it look way more finished all of a sudden. I think it's because it reminds us of like the printing process, and comic books often use that format that they, everything's outlined with black, and just looks really clean and sharp. And so when we do the same with paint, everything just looks finished. And now, I just every once in a while I glance over at the original on my left there. And, I'm not really doing the best job of emulating exactly how he's painted these, his tree forms. Like, mine's definitely has a bit more of a simple quality to it. But I also don't mind. I'm having a pretty good time here. I think one of the things that he's done is we've got a lot more, let's say, I'll do a few of them. Like these overlapping shapes. So, and I think I'll probably do more of that as we get closer to the bottom of the tree. You know, I can't think of the last time I outlined something with white like this. I quite like the effect it's creating here. And that's part of, you know, as you make a painting or you're studying other artists' paintings, these are the kind of things you want to kind of take and then put in your toolbox. And you're like, ah, maybe in the future, rather than outlining in black, I'm going to outline it in white, like that Tolkien painting we did. And also, I'm sure there's someone who's saying I'm mispronounced. Is it Tolkien or Tolkien? Or how else could you? I think it's Tolkien, but I could imagine there's someone whose ears are just bleeding at the sound of me mispronouncing this author's name over and over and over again. I'm going to go back up to the original and take a quick look at what's going on there. So there is places you can see where he has outlined things, or I guess it wasn't, he's, you know, let's say in this area here, right, where we actually see green over top of these white lines. So that could be something we do later on as well, rather than painting white back over some of these white lines that we've just put down, putting another green wash over top of them might be kind of nice too. Okay. You know, as I look at this too, I see that there's some white outlining, or not even, well, a little bit of it kind of down below too, so I am tempted to do a bit of that. Let's, in fact, some of these vines down here, or not vines, roots. Yeah, like right in here, these trees. We got these overlapping trees. I don't know if I'm going to keep some of the way that I'm painting these roots, but I'm just going to paint them in there. It's, you know, when I'm using white, it's very easy to delete anything or just paint right over it, so. Okay, now we got these. Okay. How are we doing there? Not bad. So, let's take a second to have a little bit of tea. Wow, there's lots of Donna says they are, I think maybe we're talking about the underground houses. They are too expensive to get hot water. You need to go geothermal. I wanted to go off-grid. Solar panels alone are expensive. I do remember watching a great movie documentary about people who were living in this, I think in Arizona somewhere, who were living off the grid and building these kind of earth homes. It was really interesting at the difficulty to do it, obviously because not that many people do it, so in some ways you're kind of inventing the wheel as you try to live that way. But it did seem like quite inspiring. Okay. I do, when I'm looking at this, I am thinking I kind of, the lighter green, I'm becoming less and less happy with it. So I think I'm gonna go a little bit darker. What should I do there? I'm just gonna, this same kind of green that I had before, this, actually, you know what, I'm gonna take a bit of warm blue and do that. Let's take some warm blue. Sorry, I took warm blue and cool blue, and a bit of cool yellow. Let's put a bit of white in it as well. So this is just gonna tone down that greenish, like the really bright lemony kind of green. Yeah, I think I like that better. I might not do it everywhere. And you can see I just kind of quickly putting it in a few places. And as you do this, you could also be, you know, cleaning up some of the parts of the painting that you're a little bit less happy with. Probably makes a good idea to also paint, if it's coming out darker, to paint it kind of under other ones that are brighter. So this is what I love doing. This is my favorite part of making a painting, is now I'm doing a little bit, I'm doing the decision-making process. I'm like, okay, now that I can see the painting a little bit more clearly, it's starting to become its own thing. Now is when I'm going to go in and start trying to do a bit of fine-tuning things and correcting things or whatever. Notice I forgot to put some white around there. So I feel like that's helping to kind of... It was maybe a little bit candy colored up here. And I don't think I want to get rid of all of it. There's a few that I think work really well, and it's also can kind of appear like the light is shining through them, right? So that they are a little bit brighter. But just as there might be areas where the light is shining through the trees and the leaves and you know, making them semi-transparent, there's going to be places where the light is, you know, the trees are particularly opaque and nothing is coming through. Right, so we want that kind of contrast. Again, don't worry about if anything looks a little bit sloppy, because you know, you may want to go over it with white afterwards. Okay, a few people are Irene says I'm super hungry, so I'm gonna let things dry and come back. Have a great evening, everyone, and happy painting. Absolutely, do what you need to do. My stomach's grumbling a little bit. I can hear my wife and my mom upstairs cooking something up there. Okay, I like where I think that's much better than it was before, so that's really cool. Anytime I see any improvement, I want to celebrate that. And I think now I'm going to come down. Let's do the water. Deborah says, I paint with friends Lissel and Vera from artist palette and impressionist teacher Janet. You have kept me busy and have not painted with them for months. Last week on Zoom with wine and we painted K. We did a lot of giggling and just letting our hair down. It was good. Use the things that you taught me to paint with them. Cool. Okay. So, which we're going to do the water. Let me take a look at this. That water looks like, let's just try mixing. We'll do just kind of a little bit of a test so you can see whether we should use the warm blue or the cool blue. So let's imagine we'll take some of this cool blue. We'll put that to the side here. And we'll add some white to it. All right, these are the color. Oops, sorry. Here's the color that we get. And I think what I would hope you would see, so that you can understand whether this is a warm or a cool color. Like if I just saw these on a palette and I'm like, what is what? What I would hope that you see when I add white to this color, I don't know if it's coming across too well on camera, but it already looks like a bit of a purple. Right? The white helps reveal the color for what it really is. right? Just like when we saw that that color became gray, right? So we add white to that color. Now let's do the same thing with our cool blue. Let's put some of that there, and let's mix this in. Again, I'm not sure if it really comes across very well on camera, but this blue, the cool blue, when I add white to it, it doesn't look purple at all, right? There's nothing, in no way would anybody say that that's a purple. It looks, does it look green? It looks, I would say it doesn't really look very green. It'll obviously, we put yellow in it, it would, but it just looks like a sky blue or something. So that would kind of give us some idea, at the very least, if you're struggling to figure out, is it warm or cool? If you've got maybe two blues and you're trying to tell the difference, if you can at least define what one of them is, I think that is a big bonus. Right, so I'm going to use both of these colors. I'm going to interchange, go back and forth between them, just for a little variety's sake. But I just thought I always kind of like doing quick little break out the teacher mode for a second. Okay, so let's get this cool blue on my paintbrush, and it helps that I've also painted warm colors underneath. So no matter, even if I use a cooler color, we want cooler colors a little bit further back into the painting, that the warmer colors that are surrounding it are going to help push it forward despite the coolness of that paint. So let's see, why don't we paint some of this in here? This is kind of in shadow, right? This is my cool blue with white. Okay. Going across there, and carry this whole wave all the way across. In fact, let's just bring this one here. Drop it down. Okay. There, that's sort of working. That was my my plan seems to be working, although I always say just withhold any judgment just yet. But it kind of seems like it's okay. Now, you know, working on a canvas this size, getting some of these details in is pretty tricky. So again, That's why I'm just going to simplify things. We're not going to have quite as many waves. And even honestly, the little figure, which I think is supposed to be Bilbo, on that wine barrel, you know, that may or may not be possible to paint him in there convincingly. So he may make it on the cutting room floor there. Kind of speaking of cutting room floor, one of my good friends that I have a couple friends who are very into Lord of the Rings, and both of them suggested as a painting to paint Tom Bombadil for today's painting. Obviously, I decided against it because I really liked this image, but maybe there's some other people out there who have very strong feelings about certain Lord of the Rings characters and so some of this water, obviously it gets blue down here. I might do a blue wash on some of this water here as we go here. Just getting these things in here. Wait for that to dry. Now, while that's drying, I'm going to take some of this warm blue. Remember this more purpley blue that we were talking about just moments ago? I'm going to take it. I'm going to add a bit of white to it. I'm going to use this same blue to get into these kind of roots and things that are down here. Don't worry if they're too dark or too light. Just paint them in, and you can always change things later on. I'd rather just get as much onto the canvas as possible. You know, again, I mention all the time, but I'd much rather be able to, like, even right now, if I had to, I could probably walk away from this painting. Would I be super, super happy with it? No. But could I live with myself? Yeah, I wouldn't be too bummed out if this was how this painting turned out. So you decide how much detail you want to put into some of these areas here. I'm going to take this same color. I'm going to add a bit of the cool red to it, which is going to make it go a little bit purplish. Let's take that. I see a bit of purple down here, so put a bit of purple in. Let it get a bit reddish. If I don't like it, I can paint over it. Then I'll go the other way with a little bit more bluish purple. Okay. Actually, this kind of purple kind of looks nice for these wine barrels. So I'm just going to paint it here. Even though they're kind of a little bit more gray in his painting, I think I just want that little bit more pop of color. And this little barrel here is supposed to be, I think where Bilbo is on the wine barrel. When I paint him, if I decide to paint him, I'll make him very small. Kind of, remember the surfer we did just the other day? I think that's kind of maybe what it'll look like. Very simple. Oops, okay. Okay. Maybe for that wine barrel, I'm going to put a bit of a darker purple or darker blue on the ends here. Okay, so how about while I'm here, I'm going to take a bit of, let's take some warm blue, or warm yellow, I mean, sorry. Actually, I'll just mix it right here. Just going to go into some of these areas. So this is stuff where I love obsessing in these little areas that nobody else cares about. That's my jam right in there. That's fun. Everybody has their own idea of fun, but that brown may not. Or I'm gonna put brown there, so that might not be the smartest thing to put a really kind of grassy green there, but okay. So while this is drying again, I'm gonna put a little bit. I'm gonna do a very light blue wash over part of this, but I'm gonna wait for this to dry. While that's drying, let's work on these the trees. So let's clean some brushes. Deborah says, I have to go also. I bike on a stationary bike for at least 10 kilometers once a day, and I have to do it now. Wow. Thanks so much, Michael, for painting my favorite writer. Rick and I will finish tomorrow. Great. That's a good idea to get that much exercise. I'm very proud of you for doing that. Good job. Okay. So let's mix a brown. I'm going to make a warm brown again. Let's put some warm blue. Let's get some warm red. You can see we've got a brown right there already. And we haven't even used any yellow. It's because there is a bit of yellow in that red to begin with. Which is why it's a warm yellow, or warm red. Just take this warm yellow and rub it in here. And then I can decide how light or dark I want this to be. I can just add, let's mix it right even here. If I just mix that color to the side, I'm going to have a fairly light brown. If I want, I can add a bit of white to it. You can see what that looks like. Okay. Just going to squeeze some paint off of here. And then I'm going to wipe this brush off and put it in the water to soak. So I've got a few different browns that I can use. So, let's, his are very gray. I think mine are going to brighten up a bit. So I'm painting this one with the paint that has very little white in it. And some of these roots, I don't know. I have to think about all of what I'm just doing here, if I like it or not. I might just leave, probably would have been a good idea to leave a bit of white or the lighter color on the inside there as a highlight from where the sun's coming, but I can just also tweak that as I get there. So I'm just going to mix a bit more. very red. Let's take some blue. Oops, a little dark. So now I'm going to do a bit more effort to do some of these branches. Yeah, so I think here I'm going to leave this inside edge, which would have been smart to have done on the previous ones, but it doesn't mean I'm screwed. I can still do it. It's just so I think right after this I'm going to do the background, the yellow in the sky, and then I'm also going to do the table. Branches up higher in here. Oh, was my head in the screen the whole time? Ay, ay, ay. Sorry about that. Okay. So, I think what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take this same paint that I got on my brush, and I'm going to go quite dark for the foreground here. So this is kind of like a reddish brown. I'm painting like a little shadow up here. So that's like the shadow. We are going to darken this, that part of the spine, or the cover of the book. I'll put that in shortly. And of course, I'll darken that, but I'm going to use a blue for that. I'm going to put... Okay, just my quick and dirty way of measuring. There. Okay, so these are kind of like the on the table, the wood texture there. I'm going to take the same dark color. I'm just going to add a little bit of that dark color to the tree on the outer edges, right? So the light's coming through the center. Funny, I hear my mom and my wife upstairs just chatting away. They're having a blast, drinking their wine, and her daughter running around. Okay. So adding a little bit more volume to these trees by adding a bit of a darker side to excuse me, one side of it. I am just going to do this kind of the opposite here and get some of the yellow on my brush. Let's add a bit of white to it. And I'm going to add a bit of highlight to this inner side right here. In a very sloppy way, I'll do that. Ay, ay, ay. Okay. So, next I'm gonna I'm going to make a brown again, the same brown. I'm just going to modify it a little bit. Let's add a little bit more red to it. Oops, sorry. Okay. I'm going to take this, and let's see if I can get a little bit of wood texture. So it's pretty subtle. That's all I want. I don't want it to be too loud and obvious. Just drawing some wobbly lines across here. I'll also add, let's say, an eye of a. Probably can't. I'll have to make this more obvious here in a second, but so let's do that just right now. Just putting a bit of like wood texture on here really quickly. Same thing in here. We'll put another knot in the wood down here. I'm going deliberately pretty subtle so that it's barely visible. So a little bit of this texture goes a long way. We want to try to, I think, keep it quite subtle, which means it can be a bit of a process to do, because you might have to, it might look good for a few minutes, and then as the paint dries, it becomes a little bit more subtle. It might even disappear. But that's okay. I don't think we don't want people's attention to be, I don't even know if you can really see that well on the screen or not. Just want it to be almost sort of like an unconscious thing when people look at this. We also don't want it to compete too fiercely with the branches up here, right? So, you know, as I do this, I'm kind of just like, I scour around on my palette and mix different colors together. Like, I just look at it and go like, oh, I'll just take a little bit of this and bring it into here. Trying to just hint at this texture. Dip into the dark, mix it with the white or the lighter color. See, that was a little bit dark, but just wipe the dark parts away. Hi, Edie. Are you watching me paint on TV upstairs? We love you. My little girl. Okay. Hope you're being really good for Bubba. Also, these little eye of the wood here kind of look like the eye of Sauron. Or I'm sure that I can't remember. It's been about 15 years since I read Lord of the Rings. I can't remember what that thing is called. I'm sure somebody's like, no, it is the whatever, blah, blah. Alright, so we got a bit of that wood texture on the table. I think I'll just carry, I'm going to mix a bit more of the darker blue here. Add a little bit more blue to it just to make it as dark as possible. And then I'll just carry some lines through the shadow here. Just very, very subtle. Cool. I could do a lot more on that, but I got to move on. So, if I wanted, I might do a little bit more kind of blending and kind of just a little bit of shading around the in between these pieces of wood, but let's just keep on going. We're getting pretty close. We're getting pretty close. At this point, what else do I want to do? Do I want that sky to be orangey is my question to myself. How orangey should we get that sky? I don't mind it right now. If I was to make that sky really orangey, it might affect some of the reflection down here. So, I think let's do a quick little wash over top of this area here. So, I'm going to get some water on my brush. And I'm going to go right into here. I'm just getting... Oh, sorry. Basically, I want this to be about as clear and transparent as possible. So it's like I get paint on my brush, and then I wash my brush off a little bit in the water. And then... Might have been a bit heavy-handed, so I'll just wipe some of that away, right? Let's keep on going down here. So it's almost like I just stained the surface a little bit, right? Let's do that again down here. In fact, I'm going to take that same approach. I'm going to go over these roots in here with a bit of that blue. Just going over the white in there. Nice. Okay. I'm going to do something kind of similar on here. So I'm going to take my warm blue this time. Darken that. And then I'm going to paint this warm blue. Oops. Let's paint it over this. All right, because we want this part of the bookmark, or whatever we want to call this, to appear a bit darker. I mean, this right now is almost like a watercolor process I'm using right here, but with acrylic paints. Okay, I'm going to put a bit of white back on these sides of the, and I'm just going to add a lot of, it's pretty green, isn't it? Yeah. Mix that again. I'm going to take this same color. Let's add a tiny bit of yellow to it. And we come back. I got a bit of blue on my brush and I did that. I want that to be closer to white than it actually is. But we'll let that dry and we'll come back to it. While this is drying, I'm gonna just want to put a little hint of pages in the bottom. I could even just use my pencil to do this. So I don't need to do too many of these, and I don't need to do them too dark either. I just want people to kind of immediately upon seeing it think like, oh, that's a book. So just little things that I can do to hint at the bookness of this shape. And to get this blue, I basically just took it and added a bunch of water to it. Or actually, sorry, not water, slow dry medium. And made it virtually transparent. Now as we're getting closer towards the end, what do I want to do? I mean, there's a lot of detail that I could still put in here. I could probably spend 2 or 3 more hours just going further and further and further down into detail. I'm not going to do that. I don't have the time for that. But let's see. What do I want to do as we get close to the end here? I'm just going to mix a pretty dark color to kind of get a few of the darkest lines on here. So I'm going to take my warm blue, cool blue, a little bit of whatever yellow and red I've got left or I want to use up. So I've got my warm blue, you saw me mixing in here, my cool blue. Let's just take some cool red. That's pretty dark already. Just take a bit of cool yellow in here. So you might think to yourself, well, if I put yellow into that mixture, isn't it just going to make things brighter? And I don't think it probably came across very well on camera just because this is so dark. It's getting darker and darker and darker, so it's like... But now this is about as dark a color as I can possibly mix with the colors that I have. And you could use black for this. I think it might stand out too much. So that's why I'm not going to use it. Like I think people misjudge how dark black actually is. And also, I like that this is not pure black. It's got a bluish hue to it. So this shadowy area still has some life in it. You probably tell when I'm really into the painting, when my head all of a sudden appears over top of the painting itself. That means I'm so into it, I kind of forget that I'm on camera in front of people painting. So that's both a good thing and a bad thing because I'm not really aware of what else is going on. Now, my original instinct was to put this dark blue along the sides, but remember there's light coming on top of it. So if I do that, it might just be a little bit too dark. So instead of doing that, I'm going to add a bit of white to this mixture. So we'll have like a dark gray, or a gray as opposed to a really dark blue. Sometimes this is so hard painting in these contorted positions so that I'm just going to turn the canvas. I want it to, ideally want it to look, you can see the whole thing from beginning to end in the canvas in one, without turning the canvas, but sometimes it's just prohibitively difficult. Okay, that's cool. So I would say pretty much the book, the structure of the book, the table is done. For all intents and purposes, the trees are done. A lot of the water is done. I wanted to do a little bit of darkening in the water a bit. This background and the trees up there are kind of unfinished areas, however. Wow, look at all these comments. Deborah says, good night, everyone. Donna says, Michael's, yours looks so nice. I had to stop as my body doesn't like my chair in my art room. I will work on it tomorrow. Ace says, take care, Donna. I think it's Paula, right? Donna says, I'll keep watching. I just had to move to another room. Donna says, I miss these evenings, but this has been the first painting that has interested me since class ended. He says, sounds like you like landscaping. I'm not sure what I was talking about at that moment. It's been a while since I checked these out. Or maybe I missed a whole... Paula says, boomerang workshops are very interesting. Watercolor and acrylic are fun. 1.5 hour classes. I'll look into that. Boomerang workshops. Interesting. Okay. Wow. Okay. I want to speed things up. I can hear people upstairs having dinner, so I'm going to take my cool blue, and I'm just going to add this cool blue to a few places in here. This cool blue kind of right along the edges of the water. I think that helps a big time. a little bit of outlining in here. Just to give a tiny bit of depth to some of these roots as quickly as I possibly can. I should mention, if you are enjoying today's episode and you want to support the channel, great way to do that is absolutely free and just requires liking the page, subscribing to my channel. The links are all there below. Hit the notification bell so you know when the next videos are coming up. Next week we are painting on Tuesday the most famous surrealist painting of all time, made by none other than Salvador Dali, right? The person everybody thinks of when I walk around with this mustache, like, oh, it's Dali. Not that that was in my mind as I was growing up, but I don't mind. I mean, I like Dali a lot. Well, obviously, I'm going to make a painting of his. And I'm pretty excited about that. He was an incredible craftsperson. A lot of people sort of, including people at the time, dismissed him as a hack. But there's no question that he was an exceptional painter. Like a true master. And I think that's one of the ways that he was able to pull off his work and is the fact that he could paint better than a lot of other people during his time. It was pretty hard to and he faced a tremendous amount of criticism as an artist, but I think it was pretty hard for people to attack him when the quality of his paintings were beyond the capacity, I think, of a lot of his contemporaries. They may not have liked him or his work or some of the ideas behind his paintings, but it was pretty hard to argue that he didn't know what he was doing or that he wasn't a good, technically sound artist. So I'm actually quite excited to spend a little bit of time with Dali and his art. Okay, in this area here, I'm just going to just simplify this. There are buildings and things over here. They're just going to get omitted. So put some trees quickly in here. Okay, now I'm going to come back up here and go again through any parts of the trees that I feel like need to be changed in any way here. Darkened. And I don't know if I'm going to do outline that white again. I don't mind the way it looks right now, to be quite honest. And, you know, if you're asking me what colors are in the green that I'm painting right now, it's pretty much every color is showing up right now. Because I just, once I get going, I actually, you know, you see me wash my brush, but especially towards the end of the painting, I'm often just allow the paintbrush just to kind of get a bit muddy, and I like using it in these kind of places, because then I can just add more and more variety in these places. Because if I was trying to sit here, okay, I'm going to mix a different green. Okay, now I'm going to mix another green. Okay, oh, and then another. It's a little overwhelming. Versus if I just allow my brush to get a little bit dirty, and then I come back and paint over here. Well, feels good. You know, it's just funny how the painting changes. Like this area down here felt really, really dark compared to everything else. And then as I'm painting it, it kind of lightened up and changed and transformed and was no longer quite that way anymore. Okay, I think I'm gonna paint some warm red into the sky. I'm gonna do that, or warm yellow. Oops, don't need quite that much at all. But so I'm gonna take this warm yellow and kind of paint it back into a few areas, which will allow me to kind of clean things up. Especially, well, the branches, I would probably need to do a lot. Maybe I can use some white for that. Yeah, I'm going to paint white over a few of these places where I was pretty sloppy with my branches, and I'll paint the sky back over top of them after that dries. this is a bit of slow moving work here, so. But it is this kind of stuff that really pays off. It makes the painting look pretty clean and slick at the end of the day. So I'm really just painting some white into areas here where it'll ultimately paint some sky back into. Okay. So I'm just kind of thinning out some of these branches. Could, if I had gone slower earlier, you know, I could probably have this might have looked a little bit, well, I don't know, you know, I personally would rather do this now and clean things up at this stage than be really careful earlier on in the painting. Because I don't really know what I want to clean up and what I don't want to clean up, what is not worth cleaning up. So this is also a technique that members of the group of 7 used a lot. They would paint the background, not always, but often they would paint the background might be something that they, you know, they might paint it earlier on, just like what we did here, and then paint it in after having painted all the branches in. A great example is, there's a gorgeous Tom Thompson painting that he did in his studio. I think it's called Northern River, if I recall. I think maybe while this dries, I'll pull it up on the screen so you can see. That would be a nice painting to do, but that one's pretty complex. I am thinking about during the July for Canada Day is just spending the entire month painting all Canadian artists, and you know, really going into the group of 7 and some other artists that maybe people aren't as familiar with, but should be. Okay, see how that feels so much nicer now. Everything just looks cleaner. And I still haven't even put, this is just laying the groundwork for the yellow I'm about to put in here. Okay. Oh yeah, I was gonna paint. I want to put some white. So now this is just the book, so I'm just taking that white, let's just blend it out a bit. So it looks like pages of a book. I also see that he's got almost a few little highlights. That works actually really nicely. If you know, this is a watercolor, so he probably added, this would be a little bit of maybe gouache or acrylic on top of the painting at the last little bit there. Okay, so mixing some cool yellow and cool blue together. There'd be white straps on these wine barrels too. But they won't be totally white. I think he's got a bit of blue on them. Oh, I like that white like that. Okay, so I think now let's paint the yellow in the sky. That'll help. Curious how many people watch The Mandalorian. Just started that recently. Mostly because I love the theme song to The Mandalorian. I find super hypnotic, and actually, so that's how I was like, I'm not particularly interested. But then I saw a few videos here on YouTube of the director, or not the director, the composer, and his process of writing the theme song. I was like, wow, if the music is this good, I wonder if the show is any good. And it is, if you like Star Wars, it's actually probably one of the better Star Wars related things that's come out over the past 20 years. It's probably maybe what any of the movies that have come out, which have been satisfying. I don't know if they've been particularly great, but the Mandalorian was actually pretty good. I'm only like 3 episodes into season 1. I think I don't know if season 3 is out or. Anyway, on May 4th, we have a class coming up, and May the 4th is often where people celebrate Star Wars. People call it Star Wars Day, because May the 4th be with you, which I think is very funny. So. That's really starts pulling it together, especially kind of like little the smaller branches, and that feels very Group of 7-ish right here. Which, if you're watching from elsewhere around the world, Group of 7 is was a Canadian art group movement from the 1919 or 1920. I can't remember when they actually formed. And probably still to this day the most famous group of, famous Canadian artists besides Tom Thompson or Emily Carr. And Tom Thompson was not a member of the Group of 7. That's your trivia question, the one that wins the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire episode. He died before the Group of 7 formed, and was probably why they formed in the first place at all. I think he certainly inspired the rest of those guys to start painting, or not to start painting, to form some kind of group to help promote themselves. And anyway, That feels way better. Way better. Way better. Okay, I think I'm almost done here. Now I'm just thinking what else needs to be done. There's little blue things I want to touch up around here. Also, you know, if you're feeling generous and you want to support the show in a different way, if you want to leave a donation, you can click the PayPal link below and you can leave a donation via PayPal. That's very much appreciated, especially since my video has been demonetized for a short period of time while I figure out YouTube's hoops I gotta jump back through. Even though none of it's my fault, and it's their fault, but it doesn't matter. I'm gonna paint a bit of this cool blue up into the trees here. Especially just like any places that need to be cleaned up a little bit. Kind of works. I like that little bit of a pop. I don't want to overdo it. This is cool. I like it. I like it a lot. I kind of like how the water's filtering into the V of the book there. Okay, anything else? Just last little scan around here. I want to add a bit of a highlight on the side of this tree. So I'm just going to mix a brown. Needs a bit more yellow in there. Looks a little too peachy. Ay, ay, ay. You know what, all of a sudden it just occurred to me how there's similarities between this and the Hirschfeld painting that we did way back in... It was our Halloween painting. Okay, so now I got that's so bright. I know I need to kind of do the opposite, just darken. This brown. Almost done, Michael. You know, I haven't looked at the original in a while, so I don't. I just took a look at it now, just for a brief tenth of a second there. because again, I just, at some point, I just need to focus on bringing my own painting to life rather than trying to mimic this other thing. And I think things are okay. I don't know if I'm going to paint... I don't think I'm going to paint Bilbo on the wine barrel here at all. That's until speak too soon, but a little bit of a dark outline on the outer edges here. That works beautifully. Okay. I don't think things are going to get exponentially better in the next little bit here. Oh, I was going to paint a bit of white, wasn't I? I don't know. I don't know if I need to paint any more white, I think. That might be okay. I haven't looked... Oh. Wow, look at all the comments. Sorry, I haven't... looked at the comments in a little while here. I see Shelly says your mama's not going to be very happy with you if you don't go have some dinner with her. Well, I think I missed dinner already. They're moving into the bath phase for our daughter right now, so I get the cold dinner afterwards. Heidi says, really nice, love it. I also love the nature stuff. Mine is hours behind. Paula says, I like the painting. I use watercolor instead. It looks okay. I will post it. Thanks, Michael. And Shelley says, LOL. Like the other painting back in November, I'm really going to have to try and do this again. Maybe when my eyes are not so tired. Absolutely. You know, it's hard to when your eyes are tired. I mean, I usually wear glasses at night, and about this time, 3 hours into a painting, I have a struggle to see some of those details myself. So I think let's just call it a day here. Although I'm very, very happy with the way this turned out, so I can't complain. There's a little wink wink, right? That's for anyone. I guess it's not after. This is, you know, I guess it is after. Let me find the actual original title for. I don't. Oh, let me see. Let me do have. Bilbo comes to the huts of Raft Elves. I don't know when he made this image to be actually on. 1937. Okay, there we go. Bilbo comes to the huts of the Raft Elves. I like how this one has a kind of a glow quality to it. Interesting. This is pretty close to what I was hoping we would paint today. So it's good to see when your imagination lines up with reality. Okay, so let's take one last look at these side by side. Pretty good. Interesting painting. My eyes are completely completely shot here. So thank you everybody for painting along with me here. I know it's been a few hours we've been at this, but I think the results speak for themselves, and pretty good painting, kind of a fun painting, very different than some of the things we've done recently. So yeah, we'll see you guys on Tuesday. We're going to paint a Salvador Dali, The Persistence of Time, one of the most famous paintings of last century, and one of the perhaps most important paintings of I would say probably top 50 paintings of in terms of importance, or yeah, certainly top 50, maybe top 20 most important paintings of all time. And yeah, so we'll leave it there. Thank you everybody for joining me. Please like, subscribe to the channel. Please, if you are capable, leave a donation in the PayPal link below, or contact me through the Facebook group, and you can send me a check, e-transfer, money order, etc. Another big, super helpful thing to do is going back to previous episodes you've seen. If you've been following me forever, then just leave us a little comment, like, great video, on an older video, because those comments really help boost those previous videos up there. So anything that you can do to help me is very much appreciated, since the content you see right now is free. So how long does a comment take you? Anyway, thank you, everybody. We will see you guys in a few days. Enjoy your weekend. I am contemplating doing maybe a surprise video on Saturday, but we'll see how that goes. Okay, everybody? Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will see you in our next session.